It's been around 10 months since Deltarune's 3rd and 4th chapters released. Since then, the community has been trying to piece together all of the lore we received into an endless number of theories, but today in this video I wanted to discuss where the plot of the game seems to be headed and what might be in store for us in the upcoming chapters. While I think there's certainly a few things that we can be quite confident we're going to see, there's still a lot of stuff here that's going to remain purely speculative until we can get our hands on chapters 5, 6 and 7. Now, I'm dividing this video into two main parts. In the first half, I'm going to ramble a bit about some of my personal thoughts, beliefs, theories, and some opinions that I might share with the community. I've got a lot of stuff that's in my head that's just burning to get out, so think of this as an info dump of sorts. Some of these are related to the main topic of the video, whereas some I just figured I'd talk about for fun since, it's my video and I can do what I want with it. Some topics are more obscure than others, so you might get to learn a few new theories or bits of information you weren't familiar with before, who knows. In the second half of this video, I'm going to get into the actual topic that's in the thumbnail and title, that being what I think we might see happen with the remaining 3 chapters of the game in order of my most sane theories to my list. So this video ended up being pretty large, as although Deltarune is a relatively small game, it's unbelievably detailed. So I wasn't able to cram everything into it that I wanted to, since if I did, it'd quickly become a convoluted mess, something which it's already towing the line of. But I think, or at the very least hope, it's an interesting video that's easy enough to understand. Who knows, maybe I'll make a second one once I inevitably accumulate even more knowledge about the game that I didn't have before. Anyway, let's begin. The first thing I wanted to discuss is something that took me aback when I first saw it on Reddit, posted by user Lojang. Mother 3, the sequel to Earthbound, is a game that Toby Fox is known to have taken a lot of inspiration from. In the game, there's a tower which is the home of Pokey, the main antagonist. Inside of the tower, there is a playroom belonging to him as well, Pokey is a child for those who don't know, within which is none other than a red guitar positioned right next to a bat and ball. Honestly, what this could mean, I have no idea. Though the fact that the game's main villain owns a red guitar and a bat and ball seems like it could be significant. I don't think that Des possesses a bat, ball and red guitar because Toby thought it was a neat way to reference Mother 3 or anything. I think there could be a little more to it. In Mother 3, these items are basically irrelevant. They're background decorations. They don't hold any impact for the plot whatsoever or add anything else of significance. But in Deltarune, the bat, ball and guitar are heavily associated with Des, the latter of which is one of the most important items in the game. If Toby was trying to put a Mother 3 reference in the game, I don't think he'd pick something so obscure and forgettable. Though, that being said, it wouldn't be the first time he's left with weird references in his work. Anyway, it's a weird detail that I couldn't just not point out in the video. Over the last chapter or two, I've noticed that water has become quite a prominent symbol. From what I can gather, it seems to represent reflection, connection, and transition between worlds. The waterfall in Chapter 4 demonstrates this well. Putting dark dollars into the donation box in the first sanctuary will yield an item once you, quote, transition to the other side, which happens when revisiting the area within the second sanctuary. Waterfall in Undertale is an area that serves as a transition point of sorts too. It takes a more serious tone than the previous areas do, and it starts to get deeper into the lore of the world. In this respect, it shares a lot in common with Chapter 4. Chapter 4 has no shortage of streams, waterfalls, and pools of water either. The wet ground that illuminates when walking over it, the donation box that I was just discussing, and the streams that fall down over the climbing walls being the most apparent. In the light world, both Onion San and Susie comment on being able to hear a song when the player is near the lake. The river person also comments about being able to hear an old song upon the sea in Undertale. Whether these two events are actually related, it's impossible to say for certain, but it seems like a possibility that they could be related. Adding to that, the river person has other dialogue that seems to imply they know a lot more about the wider Undertale Deltarune world than most of the other characters. Their famous line, "Beware of the man who came from the other world," being the best example, with it potentially being a reference to Gaster or Sans, especially when you take their other line into account, "Beware of the man who speaks in hands." There are others too. What's inside an acorn? It's really just a mystery, seemingly foreshadowing an organic from Chapter 4 speaking to Chris about the same topic. It seems interesting how a character so closely tied to water is also the same one that seems to know the most about worlds outside of our own. The moving background on the vessel creation screen in Chapter 1 is actually made from a picture of moving water similar to the Dark Fountains. I find it interesting that there's a connection to water being made in a scene where we speak to a character who is unambiguously Gaster. Though I think one of the best examples of water symbolism comes from Goner Kid in Undertale. For those unaware, if you have the correct fun value, there's a chance you can encounter a greyed out version of Monster Kid in Waterfall. He has the following to say, with interesting extra dialogue if you offer him an umbrella. Have you ever thought about a world where everything is exactly the same, except you don't exist? Everything functions perfectly without you. The thought terrifies me. An umbrella? But it's not raining. You know, that does make me feel a little better about this. Thank you. Please forget about me. Please don't think about this anymore. Now, I know I'm stretching a little here, since it isn't technically raining in the place where you give him the umbrella, but most of Waterfall is consistently wet and rainy, and the fact that there's a song in Undertale called It's Raining Somewhere Else and one in Deltarune called The Place Where It Rained, makes it seem like Toby was trying to make a pretty clear connection here. Adding to the points above, Noelle is tied to water too, or more specifically ice, the colder, sharper form of water. Shadow crystals are also seemingly related. Their description in-game reads as, a sharp shadow moves like water in the hand. Where the hell am I going with this? Well, nowhere at the moment. But I felt like these things were important to point out at the very least. The message we see in the Manhole Dungeon from the original game in Chapter 3 states that the Forbidden Path began with ice magic. Maybe it's just meant to allude to the fact that Noelle harnesses ice magic and that she plays an important role in the route, but maybe there's a chance it could be something else. Is there a connection here to begin with, or am I grasping at straws? Likely the latter, but you never know, I guess. Roots theory. This one has some solid evidence to back it up. Now, I won't get too into detail about the specifics of it, as that's already covered really well by GoldPro's video on the topic, which I'll link in the description, but basically, this is the general idea if you haven't seen the video. The Manhole Dungeon within the second Secret Arcade game in Chapter 3 bears a striking resemblance to the layout of Hometown. Enemies that resemble Catty, Toriel, Alphys, Undyne, and other Lighteners, a hooded figure who Chris uses to freeze enemies, including a resilient blue bird who tries to stop them, you get the idea, I'm sure. The game was originally made by Spamton and Tanner. That's certainly odd, given that it seems to instruct the player on how to initialize the Snowgrave route, or at the very least foretells what happens on it. What this implies about Spamton and Tanner, I'm not entirely sure, but if they truly did make these sectors of the game, they must know a lot more about what's going on than they let off to us. The Manhole Dungeon seems to venture further into the weird route than we have yet to see. In order to progress through the dungeon, you must explore it, killing every enemy you find to grow strong enough to cut through a wall of trees that blocks its exit. But, like I mentioned just before, all of the enemies you encounter are the residents of Hometown, including Chris's friends and family. In fact, to even progress this far, you were required to kill Susie and Rousey to gain sufficient strength to surpass a barrier that blocks your path into the Hometown part of the dungeon. Does this foreshadow something incredibly dark occurring in Chapter 5 Snowgrave, such as a massacre? Maybe. However, I doubt we'll actually need to kill Susie and Rousey. Part of the dungeon in which this occurs is in a copy of Cyber City, a chapter which we have already completed by this point in the game. I think the murders might be symbolic, more representing how the player drives Chris away from the other two, and onto a path alone where they commence their manipulation of Noelle. This could very well be the case in Chapter 5 too, and perhaps the Hometown section of the level is also similar in this respect. We push everybody else away, or perhaps we merely fight them to gain strength rather than kill them. Next up is something that I've been looking forward to talking about. What the hell is the shelter? Why is it there? Who built it? I think that I might have some answers to these questions, even if I don't have all of the pieces of the puzzle connected just yet. Personally, I think that the shelter was originally constructed to protect the residents of Hometown from the Rune. Alphys mentions she believes the shelter to have been constructed as a place to survive an emergency in Chapter 4. What sort of emergency? She isn't specific, but I doubt it's any regular natural disaster. If it was, I feel like it'd be a little clearer that it's a tornado shelter or a bunker or something like that. It would have signage, a proper name, surely. but instead it's this ominous, creepy, nondescript structure on the outskirts of town. Its location is certainly weird too. Usually, natural disaster shelters are towards the centre of a town or somewhere accessible and quick to get to. But this isn't the case with the shelter, so in some respect, this disaster must be different to anything natural. It seems to be fairly old, having existed for at least as long as Alphys has lived in the town, and by its general worn down and overgrown appearance game. Something I find interesting is the 3 symbols on the door keypad. As we know, the shelter requires 3 different codes to be input in order to be unlocked. A tree, representing Carol, or possibly the Holiday family. Badge, likely representing Undyne, Asgore, or someone else who is or was a police officer. And the Deltarune, likely representing the fun gang or somebody else associated with the prophecy. Carol is the town mayor. She is head of the town and presumably the highest ranking official in hometown. Undyne is in charge of upholding public safety, and the Deltarune seems to resemble the fun gang, the main figures of the prophecy and the ones who are to fight back against the Roaring. This combination, to me, fits perfectly with the idea of the shelter being designed to protect the Lightners from the Roaring. Now, the badge could represent Asgore or Undyne, as in the past Asgore was the police chief, and we know that Chapter 5 is almost certainly going to have a heavy focus on him. I guess we'll have to wait and see who turns out to possess this one. There is one problem to this theory though. Nobody in the fun gang has a code to the shelter, at least not one that we know of. There are 4 possible solutions to this. The first is that the shelter code is unset, and it is up to the trio to choose one. If they are in charge of opening and closing just like the other do, it does seem like a possibility that this is the case. The second is that Rousey could have it. Why he would have it, or why he would want to keep something so important a secret, I have no idea, and I doubt that it's something he'd want to hide from the others, especially following his character arc in Chapter 4, so I'd say it's pretty safe to rule this one out. Third is that Chris has it, but chooses to conceal it from the player. Chris is mentioned in the prophecy, and we the player who controls them are basically the de facto leader of the game. Fourth, and what I think is more likely than the others however, is that it has nothing to do with them at all, but instead is in possession of Alvin, with the Deltarune symbolising him and the importance of the religion in the prophecy. Next up, what happened to Des? I think that this is a difficult question to formulate a solid answer for. We've still got pretty limited information to work with, and honestly, it could be anything. However, I doubt that she's dead. There's a lot of thought and depth that's been put into her character by Toby, and it seems clear she's going to be a very important character in the upcoming chapters. If I had to guess where she went missing specifically, my money is on the forest. However, I don't think she still resides there. I also think Chris was a witness to her disappearance. Let me explain. My main 2 pieces of evidence that I am basing this upon is the information we gather from Chapter 4's Egg Room and the lyrics to Raise Up Your Bat in Chapter 3. This is the song's bridge. There's something interesting about it in Rousey's quote-unquote sensitive version of the song that he sings in-game. Unlike the rest of the song, the lyrics are not changed by him, and they remain the same across both versions. That seems like an indicator to me that it's important. The bridge of the song uses the Lost Girl motif, the one that's featured in quite a few songs throughout the game, most notably Find Her, Lost Girl, and The Distance Between Two. There seems to be a clear connection being made here. Now, the motif isn't exclusively used in scenes that revolve around Des, as it's used elsewhere as well, but it seems most likely that Raise Up Your Bat is about her specifically. Now, the reason I believe Chris is connected should be obvious enough just based off of the lyrics. Discussion of a heart shining and being used as a guide is meant to be representative of the soul. Des's disappearance occurs before the events of the game, but I believe there's a decent chance that the soul has been around for a lot longer than we have. Now, how exactly we as the player managed to take control, I've got no clue. It's probably Gaster, let's be honest. But the cage in Chris's room seems to further back up this theory. It's a bit of an odd thing for Chris to have, especially given they don't own a pet or anything like that. Plus, the cage is there right from the very start of Deltarune, and we see it for the first time right after the vessel scene. The bloodstain adjacent to the cage could also be further evidence. Perhaps it was caused by a struggle or an accident when Chris violently ripped it from their chest, but in-game, we never see Chris bleed after ripping out the soul. Maybe they only drew blood when they were first learning how to remove it, and that stain is just from their first attempts, but I don't know for sure. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. Back to the original topic at hand, the egg room in Chapter 4 seems to hint at something traumatic occurring to Chris at some point in the past before the events of the game, which I am willing to bet has something to do with Des. In the room, an unknown NPC asks Chris if they are here for art club. Chris struggles to create a portrait of what they saw behind the tree, which they presumably give up on, and instead they paint a tree over the top of the failed attempts. Do I think that Des could be behind the tree? No. In the other egg rooms throughout the game, a tree is always present, behind which is the Forgotten Man. Although it cannot be seen properly in the Chapter 4 egg room, the same is the case here as well, with the Forgotten Man and the tree here too. It seems self-evident that Chris is attempting to draw him, or draw something that he symbolically represents. At first, I thought that Chris might be intentionally preventing the player from knowing more information by refusing to draw what was behind the tree, but when the player is prompted with the decision to draw something on the canvas, it is Chris who chooses to draw what they saw behind the tree, or at least attempt to anyway, not the player. They therefore must want us to know, or be okay with us knowing at the very least. There is also a sink in the room that you can interact with, which Chris attempts to use, but cannot wash something away that is present on their hands. That seems symbolic of something, perhaps something they did either intentionally or unintentionally. Also, this egg room is in a hospital, if I forgot to mention it already, and given the whole art class thing and Chris trying to draw something that they're unable to, it seems like they're receiving some kind of psychiatric treatment. The only possible reason for this, at least that we're aware of thus far, is trauma caused by Des's disappearance. Though it could very well be something else, but right now it seems like the most likely candidate. As for where Des is now, I think that the unused text in the files and all the chapters are likely her. She's the only character who seems to align with possessing this dialogue. We know she's gone missing, and we are yet to know where she is or what happened to her. Now, like I said, I think there's evidence to suggest that Des went missing in the forest. How she got from there to wherever she is now, I'm unsure. Perhaps a dark world, perhaps the tale of hell mentioned by the prophecy, perhaps something else entirely. From what I can tell, it seems too early to make any proper predictions, and I think we are going to have to wait until we receive more information in the later chapters before we can get a proper idea of what happened. On to the next topic. I believe that Sans, Gaster, and Papyrus are far more connected than Toby has been letting off. As pointed out by Tulip10 in a video posted not too long ago, there is a trio of skeletons that feature in Deltarune, a game we know Toby has taken inspiration from before. The trio are, interestingly, known as the Sandbone Trio. Now yes, I know that Sans and Papyrus were both named after fonts because they're a reference to the webcomic Helvetica, but the similarities are still there, and it wouldn't surprise me if this was at least partial inspiration. In the game, there is a taller red skeleton, a shorter blue skeleton, and a medium green-sized skeleton. Well, I mean, at least that's the colour they all turn when you alter their hues anyway. Look, it's a stretch, I know, but we don't know how strong of an inspiration they were in Toby's design of Sans, Papyrus, and Gaster, and the similarities are absolutely there. If you ask me, too many things are aligning for it to just be a coincidence. The three skeletons also talk in different fonts from the other characters in the game too, just like Sans, Papyrus, and Gaster do. The Undertale 10th anniversary livestream provides us more potential evidence to back up this theory too. The Gaster hallway is encountered during the live playthrough, but it looks a little different to the one found in a regular Undertale copy. This one isn't in grayscale, but instead, colour. Something we know so far about Gaster is that a lot of the characters and a few of the places that are associated with him are in grayscale, or they're grayscale variants of other places or sprites. The Gaster followers, collectively known as Goners, all share this trait. There's a particular one in Undertale that caught my attention too. They are the only one of Gaster's followers who does not have a colour form somewhere else in the game, but funnily enough, a coloured version can be found in Deltarune within the library. I have a theory on why this is, which I'll touch on fairly soon. I think that the whole grayscale and colour copy thing has something to do with existence and travel between worlds. I mean, the grayscale Gaster followers are literally called goners. Anyway, there's something more important about this door than just its colour. It's the fact that it's the exact same as the doors seen in Sans and Papyrus' house. That's certainly an odd detail, to say the least. Here's a few other interesting facts that seem to only further reinforce this idea that the three are related. Sans and Papyrus apparently just randomly show up one day in Snowdin, as we learn in Undertale. Sure, I guess that does fit their typical behaviour, but if they came from elsewhere, it would also make sense, especially if they have a connection to the elusive, borderline non-existent ghost character who is shattered across time and space. Also, as many of you may know, Sans has a strange machine in his shed behind his house, and on the desk adjacent to it is a blueprint for said machine that is described as being written in, quote, unreadable symbols. I think we all know who that could be alluding to by now. Now, I don't know if this exactly counts as evidence, but I'll mention it anyway. If you're in a room with a Gaster follower and you try to call Papyrus on your phone, you will not be able to. However, you won't encounter such an issue if you attempt to call Toriel. I find it to be an interesting addition to the game, and it seems too specific to just be a coincidence. Something else that's interesting is that in Deltarune, you're required to fight the Standbone trio at stage 7 of the game. And do you know what chapter of Deltarune is set to be the final one? I don't know whether I buy into the idea that we'll actually fight them personally, but I guess it's not entirely off the tables. We really don't know what Toby might be planning to pull on us, so yeah. If this theory does turn out to be true and the Sandbone Trio inspired the creation of Sans, Papyrus and Gaster, I don't know. Maybe there's more valuable information we could dig up on them here. Anyway, remaining on Gaster-related topics, I am completely certain that the voice at the start of Deltarune Chapter 1 is Gaster. I won't bore you with an exhaustive list of details since I'm sure this has been covered to death, but here's just a small list of just some of the evidence. Remaining once again on Gaster-related topics, here is another theory that I think is quite interesting and that seems to have a decent amount of evidence to support it. Now, obviously, the worlds of Undertale and Deltarune are connected or related in some fashion. There's plenty of theories about how certain characters may have travelled between the two worlds somehow, something that I've mentioned in this video in passing already. Now, I'd like to throw my 2 cents in. Currently, I lean towards the belief that travel is in fact possible, or at least it was at some point. If we look back to entry 17 from Undertale for a moment, its contents become far more fascinating once you understand how the Dark Fountains and Deltarune work. Entry number 17. Dark, darker yet darker. The darkness keeps growing. The shadows cutting deeper. Photon readings negative. Not only do these describe an immense darkness, the sort required in the formation of a dark fountain, the line photon readings negative seems to describe a more specific detail about the formation requirements. In Chapter 3, Ralsei states that the formation of a dark fountain, or dark world, requires a room to become darker than dark. If Gaster was getting readings of photons, or light particles, in the negatives, I think it's pretty clear-cut that whatever test is being conducted by him here is related to dark fountains. We already believe that Gaster may have been studying determination during his time as royal scientist. There's an interesting video by Wiztal which details a theory about how determination and the shadow crystals might be fundamental opposites of one another. If this theory does turn out to be true, then the idea that Gaster might have some level of knowledge about the shadow crystals or dark fountains makes sense, given his level of intelligence and role as royal scientist. Adding to this, if Gaster was experimenting with determination before Alphys took over once he went missing, it makes even more sense. I have a theory that perhaps Gaster falling into the core wasn't an unfortunate accident. I think that there's a chance he entered on purpose. Maybe the core wasn't just constructed to produce power, and it had a secondary purpose, interdimensional travel. We know from the third true lab entry that the extraction of souls requires immense power. Now, maybe this just means that a very powerful monster or human must do it, but if it refers to raw energy, the core would be the perfect way to produce the power required. Now, why would Gaster jump into the core? Well, I haven't got a clue. Maybe that was the best way to accumulate the energy to transport his soul? We honestly have no idea how interdimensional travel in-universe works, or if it's even possible. This does turn out to be true. Why would Gaster want to travel across dimensions anyway? Well, I feel like he has pretty obvious motivations. For one, he's a scientist, and no doubt he's very curious about the world, or worlds, around him. This alone would be sufficient motivation, but on top of this, it could have served as an alternate way for the monsters to escape the underground without the need to destroy the barrier. If Gaster had somehow ended up in the universe of Deltarune, it would explain why he's present in the vessel creation sequence in other parts of the game. Next up, it seems pretty clear that the three triangles in the Deltarune are Chris, Rousey, and Susie. A single look at the carpet in Rousey's castle is all it takes to confirm this. For those who might be colourblind, the top left triangle is magenta, the top right is blue, and the bottom triangle is green, so pretty cut and dry. Something else to note that I thought was interesting is that Chris and Susie's triangles point upwards, while Rousey's points downwards. The most common explanation for this that I've heard is because Rousey is a Darkener, and that seems to make the most sense to me too. This by extension also rules out the possibility of him secretly being a Lightener, like some have theorised in the community. Who the Angel is based off the Deltarune is a little less clear. Noelle is a possibility. She is referred to as an angel throughout the game, but whether or not that literally translates to her being the angel in the prophecy or not is another thing. It could be the knight, perhaps? It doesn't seem like the angel is necessarily on the side of the heroes in this story. All the way back in 2016, 2 years before the release of Chapter 1, the Deltarune website used to contain a hidden line of the prophecy. 3 heroes set out to banish the angel's heaven. It seems that according to the prophecy, the Fun Gang is supposed to work directly against the angel's ambitions, presumably their desire to bring about their own heaven, likely the Roaring. Interestingly, the hidden line of the prophecy is written in Wingdings. Aside from these 2 possibilities, there is always the chance that the angel is meant to be more figurative or might represent something more abstract, like the darkness itself or something along those lines. Something else to note about the symbolism of the Deltarune is the first word in its name, delta. In pretty much every field of maths and science, the Greek symbol delta represents change. Usually, a change in energy, velocity, voltage, or something like that. Perhaps this information holds significance for the story, perhaps not, but I thought I'd mention it anyway. Next up, I wanted to discuss those goddamn loose clown stickers. So for those who don't know what the hell I'm talking about, there's this set of digital stickers floating around online known as the loose clown stickers. Each one features a clown with a different expression, pose or phrase, and they're meant for use in texting. What's really interesting though, is that some of them seem to closely resemble scenes from the game involving secret bosses, or potentially hint at future boss encounters. Now, here's the real kicker. Toby has already confirmed that 2 of these stickers inspired the Devil fight. So we know for certain that there is at least some truth to this crackpot theory. Because of this, I'd say it's impossible to rule out that Toby has also used these stickers as inspiration for future fights too. From what I could find, there's 40 of these in total, and they're all made by this person called Onari. Originally I had this theory that Toby might have made them years ago as some kind of ARG foreshadowing the release of Deltarune, since the stickers just seem generally strange, and because that just seems like the type of thing he'd probably do. But on closer inspection into the account that made these, this person, whoever they are, has made plenty of other sticker sets in the past as well, and it just seems kind of unlikely that they are actually Toby. Now, compared to some of the other stickers made by Onari, the loose clown stickers are, a little weird. While the other stickers in their collection feature quirky characters with messages that would be a little more commonplace in regular conversation, the clown stickers feature stuff like failure, looking, and, dangerous. Some of them are kind of ominous. Sure, there's a few normal ones that you'd be more likely to use in a text, but I'd say these normal ones make up only a minority of the pack. Anyway, let me show you why I think this theory could hold weight. So, first up, we've got the 2 stickers that are confirmed by Toby to have inspired a boss, those being Metamorphosis and I Can Do Anything, both of which are voice lines in the Devil fight. Now, the next secret boss we fight is Spampton Neo. From what I can tell, there are 2 stickers that might have been referenced, those being What and Are You Serious? These are both the lines from the fight when Spampton picks up the phone mid-battle. You may also notice the clown's hand suspiciously up towards the ear in the first of these. Next is the Knight. And this is where the foundations of this theory get a little shaky. I can't really figure out any clear references between any of these stickers in the night, except for maybe failure, which could allude how we are supposedly destined to fail in our fight against the night. But maybe this is one that we'll figure out once we learn more about the night in later chapters. Next is Gerson, and this one is a little more clear. The first is Break, which seems could be a reference to when we have tea with him in chapter 4. It's a bit of an obscure thing to reference, but if Toby's general goal was to have each secret boss reference 2 of these stickers, maybe he had to get a little creative with how he weaved the references into the game. The next is Suit Yourself, which is a line said by Gerson, and the clown is in a pose we see Gerson make when dodging Susie's attacks throughout his boss fight. As to who or what the other stickers could be alluding to in other chapters, it's anyone's guess. If the references to each boss are this vague and obscure, only ever alluding to random phases or scenes from the game, it's going to be impossible to make any solid predictions at all. I mean, imagine you're trying to predict we'd fight Gerson in chapter 4 from tea time and Suit Yourself alone. But there was one pair of stickers that caught my attention, the So What and What's Up stickers. As you can see, the clown is shrugging in both of these. If you ask me, these both have a striking resemblance to Sans. Now, I can't quite explain it, but something about the mannerisms present here and the use of language on display just screams Sans. Again, this is all pure speculation, but it's interesting nonetheless. These aren't the only stickers that I wanted to make mention of. There are some very interesting ones in this collection, and it's fascinating to speculate about what they could possibly be foreshadowing. Be quiet, no contact. Change, helpless, no motivation, actual shape, I am a protagonist, the clown holding a goddamn pink balloon in one hand and a gold balloon in the other. Yeah, look, I'm sure you get the idea. Moving on, the shadow crystals are interesting items, but obviously they seem to have some unique properties that other items in the game do not. For starters, they are invisible in the Dark Worlds, minus the shadow that they leave. They don't seem to change forms between the Light and Dark Worlds either, something we know from their item descriptions and from seeing the Night and the Light World. In the Dark World, they offer a window into the Light World. When the player inspects them in the Dark Worlds, they allow them to see the features of the Light World through the crystal. It is also possible to do this in the Light World in some points of the game. I won't cover all of them, but here are a couple of examples. The Black Shard is a little bit different, however. It is described as being opaque, unlike the shadow crystals, which are invisible. It seems to maintain its form across the Light and Dark World, however, so they both have that in common. The Shadow Mantle, if you count it as some kind of shadow item, is different again. Shadows are said to slip off of it like water. Despite being a powerful magic item, it is described by Sean as merely being a piece of old cloth. From what we have seen thus far, it doesn't seem to have a light world counterpart. Now, whether this is because it disappears, becomes invisible, or something else happens to it when we leave the Dark World, it's hard to tell. But Sean mentions wanting to give it to the player after you give him Chapter 1 and 2 Shadow Crystals, but he is unable to as it has gone missing. Is this perhaps the work of ERAM? Maybe, but honestly I have no idea. Anyway, all 3 of these objects seem to have interesting interactions with light and shadows. Shadow crystals are transparent, Black Shard is opaque, and the Shadow Mantle seems to be reflective in some sense, though it doesn't fit in quite as neatly with the other 2. What could this mean? Maybe the Shadow Crystals and the Black Shard are similar, but entirely different materials? Maybe they are the same, and for whatever reason the Black Shard acts in a different way to the standard Shadow Crystals? There's definitely a lot of questions yet to be answered about what the hell this stuff is, how it forms, and what its purpose is. On a similar note, I think it's very likely that the material the Knight is made from is Shadow Crystal. If the Shadow Crystals harness the ability to warp one's perspective of reality, it might explain why the Knight is so hostile. I think that this is alluded to by one of the responses we got to the email ARG from a few months ago. When participants submitted the number 1225 in their response, they received the answer, "When you have a bat, everything looks like a ball." Assuming Death's the Knight, this response seems to hint at their perspective being warped by something, making them prone to violent behaviour. Something else that also seemingly suggests that the Knight is made from Shadow Crystal is that the Knight remains unchanged between Light and Dark Worlds, just like the Shadow Crystals and the Dark Shard. There is a problem I have with this theory though, and that is due to a problem raised by the Dark Shard and its properties. If the knight is made from shadow crystal, why is the dark shard, which Susie chips off the knight's sword, opaque? In my opinion, it could have something to do with damage caused by Susie chipping it off by force, or maybe the knight's weapon is a different material. Perhaps there's something else stopping us from seeing through it like we can with regular shadow crystals. Honestly, it's anyone's guess. So that concludes the big things that I wanted to discuss. But there's still a few, hopefully, smaller things that I wanted to talk about that I'll try my very best to rattle off before moving on to part 2 of the video. There's a theory going around that Hometown is cut off from the outside world for some as of yet unknown reason. At first, this seems to make a lot of sense. Alphys mentions something about the internet being down early on in the game. The purpose of the police barrier in the outskirts of town has also not yet been revealed. On top of this, as mentioned earlier, Toby's work is inspired heavily by Mother 3, a game which, spoiler alert in case you wanted to play it yourself, takes place on a chain of islands isolated from the rest of the world following an apocalyptic event. However, I think that isolation theory can be shot down by a single piece of evidence. Asriel is currently away at college. At first I thought maybe there's some kind of one-way gate deal going on, where you can leave Hometown but you can't come back, or you can enter but once you're in Hometown you can't leave. But I doubt it, since Asriel, as far as we know, never encountered any trouble trying to leave. Even if the isolation is only a recent thing that's happened, I feel like it would still be the talk of the town right now and we'd be hearing about it in-game non-stop. Everybody has been, rightfully, very focused on the flower shop being the setting for Chapter 5. But there's always the chance it's a red herring. Like I mentioned before, we still don't know what the purpose is behind the police barrier in the outskirts of town, which could definitely be a potential location. There's also the possibility that it involves the festival, and takes place outside rather than within an enclosed space. Though there's plenty of evidence that points towards Asgore featuring in the next chapter heavily, from what I can tell, none of it necessarily suggests that it will take place in the flower shop. It makes a lot of sense, don't get me wrong. I think that the next chapter will most likely be set there as well. However, there's still definitely a chance it could take place elsewhere. Also, there's always the chance that we visit multiple Dark Worlds in this chapter, just like we did in Chapter 4. Spamton's dialogue, although cryptic and seemingly meaningless at times, seems to hold a lot of weight. We don't need anyone else. We don't need easels or CRTs. We don't need Mike. These lines from Chapter 2 all reference characters we haven't yet been introduced to at this stage in the game, that being Tanner and Mike. Chris, don't believe anything you see on TV. The man's a criminal, I tell you. A criminal. Again, another line alluding to Tanner and the plot of Chapter 3. Hey! I've never seen a heart-shaped object like that before. My eyes are burning, like DVDs of any movie at half price. This one could reference ERAM, with the statement "my eyes are burning" being a possible nod to Burning Eyes, the battle theme that plays when fighting ERAM. What are you afraid of? According to Encyclopedia of Being Afraid, there's nothing to fear except... Can anyone hear me? Help. Huh? What? No. I didn't hear anything just now, but it sounded like they were talking to you. These lines might be referencing the unused dialogue in the game code that is often attributed to Des. Perhaps Des may somehow be trying to communicate to us through Spamton here. Speaking of communion, Chris, did you know that the knight... No, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to... Too many excess vacation days? Take a goddamn vacation straight to hell. In this one, the same voice, the one that might be Des that is, seems to be speaking again, seemingly panicking after making mention of the knight. I've got no clue what all of this could mean, but it's a clear indicator that we should pay close attention to Spamton's dialogue, as it often contains a lot more information than it initially seems to. Spamton also seemed to be talking to Gaster at some point. When preparing to leave Queen's Mansion following his eviction, one of the Addisons came to check on him. However, he was gone when they arrived, leaving behind a phone still on the line to a call. Upon listening to the voice on the other end, the Addison heard nothing but garbage noise. Now, if there's anything we know about garbage noise from phones, it's associated with Gaster. So, what are the eggs? I've got no damn clue. Spamton may be involved, Noella's probably involved, going off of what is said about the eggs in Spamton sweepstakes. They seem to have a lot to do with both the physical world and the digital world, but I really doubt that they're anything load-bearing for the Deltarune lore. The egg's description reads as follows: not too important, not too unimportant. Still, I'm interested to learn more about them. Also, fun fact, did you know that the word egg in Wingdings is spelt with a left pointing finger and 2 upwards pointing fingers, which also happens to be the way a knight moves in chess? That's certainly interesting. In Undertale, there's a number of unused assets and inaccessible secrets that can only be found through file modification. Near Napstablook's house in Waterfall, there is a stable that can be found via this method, inside of which is a sprite that some suspect could be Gaster. When talking to him, he says *X in Wingdings, which looks like an envelope followed by an X in a box. Does this character want us to delete or destroy something, perhaps a message of some kind? No idea what the hell this could be about, but it's something that not too many people seem to be aware of and something that I wanted to make mention of in this video. Alright, so this next one is a massive stretch, but firstly, here's some background information. Did you know that Gerson is named after 2 famous Super Smash Bros. Players? Gerson and Super Boom Fan. Alvin is also named after a Smash Bros. Player too, but he isn't important in what I'm discussing here. Sorry, Alvin. So years ago, a famous match took place between Gerson and Super Boom Fan. What made this match so notable was how comically long it went on for. The fight dragged on for a painstaking 2 hours, which was pretty much unheard of at the time. Now don't quote me on this, but I also read somewhere that the fight featured a lot of turtling, which is a strategy used in Smash, and also a lot of other games, where you just stall for time and wait until your opponent makes a move that leaves them vulnerable before attacking. Anyway, I had this crackpot theory come into my mind when I was researching about all of this. Super Boom Fan plays as Kirby, and Gerson plays as Pikachu for this game. Kirby is pink, and Pikachu is yellow. Is there, maybe, a small chance that Toby picked pink and gold to be symbolic in Deltarune because of this match? Now, Super Boom Fan did play as a yellow Kirby in this match, but we're going to gloss over that because Kirby is normally pink, and like I said, this is a crackpot theory. Anyway, I don't know, I thought it was interesting and wouldn't be the first time Toby has taken inspiration from something incredibly obscure and ridiculous. Toby loves to put niche references in his work, and Deltarune thus far has been no exception. Whether it be commercials from the 90s, Smash games, or digital stickers, there's really no cap on how obscure it can get. It does get me thinking though, are there still other references hidden away in Deltarune that we haven't yet discovered? Could they give us any more lore? Who knows? Probably. It seems evident to me that Chris, not the soul, is communicating with and assisting the knight. During the knight fight, if you manage to avoid taking damage during the charge-up period of the knight's final attack, you'll get the following flavor text. Chris coughed. The enemy slowly tilted its head. Take note of the fact that Chris's name is used specifically and not the word you. Throughout the entire fight, this is the only time where Chris is referred to specifically instead of the player. As you all probably know, following the final attack, Susie tries to strike the knight once their guard has finally lowered, but the knight parries just in time, following up with a counter-attack, wounding her in Rouse, but sparing Chris. It seems that Chris perhaps did this in an attempt to save the knight from Susie's attack. The knight appears to destabilise while blocking Susie's attack, suggesting that they were vulnerable and perhaps in a state where they could be harmed. It seems that Chris either cares about the knight because they are someone close, or they need to keep the knight alive for some unknown reason. One last thing I wanted to throw in here, I saw a video by Sodaman recently that covers some of the hidden content in the files of Deltarune. Something they pointed out was that if you edit a specific line of code in the files, the sprite of the shadow figure in the manhole dungeon that mimics Chris's movement is suddenly changed to a deer that is used nowhere else in the game. No idea what this could be about, but it's pretty wild. His video is fascinating, and if you want to know more, go watch it. But dear god, Toby has a knack for attention to detail. Okay, so some of those did end up being a bit longer than I would have liked them to be, but anyway, we got here eventually. Now it's time for the second part of this video. What are we going to see happen in the next 3 chapters of Deltarune? I'm going to be doing these in order of most sane to least. So first, let's begin with the prediction I have the most confidence in. We will be fighting more Titans in the upcoming chapters. Okay, I know maybe this one is a bit of a cop-out because it seems extremely obvious that this is going to happen, but like I said, it's the one I have the most confidence in. The prophecy does mention Titans, plural, will emerge during the Roaring. Adding to this, the Black Shard and currently unimplemented Twisted Sword do increase damage against shadow enemies like the Titan Spawn and the Titans themselves. Given this fact, it seems pretty obvious that we're going to encounter a lot more of them. My next prediction is that Chapter 5 is going to get pretty dark, and I don't mean that in the more literal sense, though that will probably be the case as well. Chapter 4 was a considerable change in tone from the previous 3 chapters, and no doubt Chapter 5 will follow this pattern as we delve deeper into the story. Although Chapter 4 had plenty of dark moments, especially along the Snowgrave route, I think that Chapter 5 is going to be far more intense. I'll go into the specifics of why I think this is a little later on, but when the prophecy states that Asgore is trapped in an asylum, Ralsei is alone in the deepest dark, and that Susie will have to confront the reality of whatever was written on that final prophecy panel in Chapter 4, things are looking like they're going to get pretty rough for everybody in the next chapter. My next prediction is that Asgore is going to feature heavily in the next chapter. This one seems pretty likely. Most of the fandom is of this opinion. Gerson alludes to a garden in Chapter 5 when describing the Lord of the Hammer. We know Asgore possesses a black shard, he likely knows something about Death's disappearance. I'm sure I don't need to go too into detail about why I think this. Alright, next up, I think that Noelle will be revealed as the girl with the sword featured in the prophecy. Although the silhouette doesn't resemble her exactly, one of the main notable absences being her antlers, we have seen that her Dark World sprite has a hood as well as her sprite in the original game, just like in the prophecy panel where she is seen wearing it. Adding to this, Noelle is the only character in the game aside from Ralsei and Susie who have actually been a member of Chris's party or been in combat. The smoking gun for me, however, is the fact that Deltarune's code allows Noelle to equip swords, just as she appears to be doing in the prophecy panel. The only possible reason I could see for this is that it was done in anticipation for the later chapters. With Chris as a jack of all trades, Susie as a tank, and Ralsei as support, I could see Noelle acting as a glass cannon of sorts, given that she has the lowest base HP in the game, yet she is also able to wield swords and very powerful magic attacks. My next prediction ties into the last one. In Chapter 5, I think that Ralsei will become separated from the group and Noelle will take his place. It's already pretty clear that Noelle will feature in Chapter 5 and we will likely fight alongside her. However, no more than 3 characters can be in combat at a time, meaning that someone must be absent in order for Noelle to take their place. Unless Toby decides to implement a 4-character combat system or some kind of tag-out mechanic. The prophecy may also allude to this as well. The third hero, the prince alone in the deepest dark. Now, while this could easily be a metaphor for the state of Ralsei's mind given his character arc over chapters 3 and 4, I could definitely see this being a more literal foreshadowing of events to come too. Maybe it's both. As pointed out in GoldPro's Roots Theory video, Chris and Susie have both fought secret bosses alone, but Ralsei is yet to have done this. Perhaps during this disappearance, Ralsei will encounter Chapter 5's secret boss. Now, we'll be treading into slightly murkier waters with the following theories, but I still think there's decent evidence to support them. I think that in Chapters 6 and 7, we might see the collapse of Deltarune's timeline. Deltarune, and by extension Undertale, are built around concepts like alternate realities, the save mechanic, prophecies, events, predictions, choices, history, you get the idea. Gerson holds the bulk of my evidence for this theory, so let me explain why I think this might happen. In the 10th anniversary stream, his monologue towards the end of the game focuses a lot on history. Which events were real, which were not, how much truth lies in records, that kind of stuff. It felt like interesting timing for Toby to put a monologue like this in an event that has taken place pre-Chapter 5 and beyond. Its positioning pretty much right at the end of the stream made it feel rather important too, as the final thing we are left with before the ending. In Deltarune, Gerson is obviously heavily associated with the prophecy. He teaches us more about it, and even suggests that there might be a way for it to be broken somehow. As most of you know, Lord of the Hammer, which was based upon the prophecies, was written by him. During Susie's fight with him, once he finishes describing events that take place in chapters 1 to 5, he goes on to say the following. What happens next? Who knows? There was only one more chapter. After that, it all stopped. That next book, it never did get written. The story became so grand, so overwhelming, some say it swallowed up the author himself. It seems that following the conclusion of Chapter 5, something significant is going to happen. Based on Gerson's description here, the events of Deltarune's 6th chapter are unclear. Gerson was never able to write it, most likely because the task of doing so was too overwhelming, assuming that the author in this context is Gerson referring to himself in third person, and not the Angel, Toby himself, Gaster, or whoever might have been referenced here as having authored the universe of Deltarune. What is even more interesting is that Gaster doesn't even make mention of a 7th chapter. We know it exists, it's on the menu of the game, we've been told for years that there will be 7 chapters in total. In fact, Toby and the other devs are working on it right now. What might cause this timeline collapse? My guess is the most obvious answer, that being the Roaring. An apocalyptic world-ending event resulting in the destruction of time itself in all forms seems to be the most probable cause according to the lore we have at present. Staying on the topic of timelines, there's a common theory you hear a lot in the Deltarune community that the Weird Route is going to finish in Chapter 5 rather than Chapter 7. The main reason for this is the lack of a 6 or 7 on the Spampton Sweepstakes numbers page. Given that the Weird Route's whole thing revolves around the player forcing the game in a direction it wasn't meant to go, this would make sense. However, I think there's decent evidence to suggest that the game won't actually finish early. Firstly, I need to give an explanation of what I think the numbers represent. I think they represent the approximate quantity of steps you need to take in each chapter to continue along the Weird Route. Chapter 1, the number is very small and invisible, and there's no steps you need to take as it hasn't begun yet. Chapter 2, the number is big, and there are quite a number of steps you have to take to initialize the route, including obtaining the freeze ring, freezing all of the enemies, using Snowgrave on Birdley, picking all of the right dialogue options. Then in Chapter 3, the number is equal in size to Chapter 2, but it's invisible. There are no necessary steps you must take in Chapter 3 to continue along the Weird Route, but it does contain important hints about the route's existence and how to initiate it, something that is obviously very important if you were not familiar with its existence beforehand. These are hidden within the original game, and I feel like it's sufficiently fair to say that the number of steps required to access this information is roughly equal to the amount required to complete Chapter 2's Weird Route section. You have to get 2 S, T or Z ranks in the minigames to gain access to both sectors of the original game. Chapter 4's number is small, and there are considerably less steps that must be undertaken to maintain the route than in Chapter 2. There are only a few dialogue options the player has to select in order to stay on the route. Lastly, Chapter 5 is medium, so we can assume that it will have more steps than Chapter 4, but less than Chapter 2 if this theory actually holds true. Now, something I want to point out is that if the numbers represent the importance or the impact of each Snowgrave chapter, which seems to be the generally accepted theory by the community, I can't see the route ending 2 numbers early on a medium-sized number like Chapter 5. If anything, the ending chapter's number should be bigger than the 2 and 3, or at least the same size. Smaller doesn't seem to make sense. The ending is obviously a huge deal. If my theory about the meaning of the numbers is true, it would make perfect sense for chapters 6 and 7 to be absent from the website. All it would mean is that by the end of chapter 5, we have completely locked ourselves into the Weird Route, and there are no further steps the player must take to avoid aborting it. Now, this being said, there is always the chance that I'm right about the meaning of the numbers and the route also ends early, as the size of the number would have nothing to do with the significance, but rather the number of steps required to maintain the route, like I said, which I'd argue is this theory's biggest flaw. Regardless, I'm fairly confident my theory about the numbers is correct, though of course we'll have to wait and see. My next prediction is that Gaster is a significant character in Deltarune's story, and we will be seeing and hearing more of him in the next chapters. It's already very clear that he's the voice at the very start of the game, and he is presumably the voice we hear after losing in the night fight, and following the end of chapter 4. As I mentioned in the first part of this video, I think Gaster might have been conducting experiments involving the creation of Dark Worlds and Undertale, and if that really was the case, perhaps it has something to do with how he ended up in the world of Deltarune. Now yes, there are some issues with this theory. For one, Dark Worlds are a different thing to parallel universes. Just because Gaster was researching Dark Worlds in Undertale doesn't necessarily mean he has the capability to travel across universes. Dark Worlds are sections of a reality that have been altered by darkness, not an entirely separate entity. Still though, we don't know anything about Dark Worlds or how they function yet, and on top of that, Gaster is a character who we know very little about. It's hard to come to any solid conclusions about the possibility of multiversal travel, or by extension, whether Gaster is even capable of such a thing. Also, there's also the possibility that the Gaster we encounter in Deltarune isn't even the one from Undertale anyway. After all, Deltarune is a separate universe with separate characters from those of Undertale, and there's definitely a chance that this rule also applies to him too. After all, the song that plays in the Veshal creation screen during Chapter 1 is called Another Hymn. In Chapter 5, I think we are going to learn more about the Shelter. What we will learn specifically, it's hard to know for sure, but perhaps we will learn of its true purpose, what is inside, or why Alphys thinks that retreating into it during an emergency would be worse than just staying outside. I think that maybe there's a chance we'll see Eram down there in his physical form, if he even has one that is, but honestly, who really knows? I think we might have already been given a few hints as to what its interior looks like at the end of the original game, and it's more or less what you'd expect. A dark, gloomy metal and concrete shelter. At present, the shelter remains a dark world. What the shelter's dark world would look like when compared to its light-forward form, God knows. It could be anything. While I don't think we'll enter the shelter until beyond Chapter 5, I'd say it's pretty likely we'll learn more about it while we are busy collecting the 3 codes required to enter. The shelter is a high priority location for Chris and Susie to visit, as Undyne is still inside even though she isn't in direct danger right now. I believe the purpose of the Weird Route could be to serve as some kind of alternative path that the player can choose to take to avoid the fate of the prophecy by backtracking to earlier chapters. More specifically, I think it might have something to do with preventing the tragedy that is foreshadowed by the prophecy in Chapter 4. As I discussed before, I think that the second hero mentioned by the prophecy is Noelle. Susie is also mentioned by the prophecy, but not as one of the heroes. Last was the girl. At last was the girl. Prophecy seems to imply that somebody must die in order for the worlds to be saved. Personally, I think that Noelle is most likely the one who will die, but Susie is also a potential candidate. My evidence for this lies mainly in the reaction that Susie has to seeing those final few panels of the prophecy. You're worried about that? Seriously? This stupid prophecy? Like something like that would happen. I wouldn't let it happen, Chris wouldn't let it happen, and obviously you wouldn't let it happen. As we all know, Susie smashes the panel before we can see it. But given her intense reaction and that she appears to be in denial, it's very clear that whatever must happen for the worlds to be saved is obviously very upsetting to her. Most likely, it's the loss of someone she holds close, as I doubt anything else could really elicit such a strong response like this from her. Now, while I still think there's a solid chance she could also be the one who has to die, I feel like her dialogue would read a little differently, as she'd be talking about herself here, and I think that different wording would make more sense. Given that Susie isn't close with many people, this leaves one potential candidate who must be the one to lose their life. Noelle. Now, back to the purpose of the Weird Route. By returning to the start of the game and gradually moulding Noelle into a ruthless weapon, the player might be able to use brute force to prevent her own death, or Susie's, depending on who must die. This theory makes even more sense if you're a believer in Death Knight. Death is Noelle's sister, but at the same time, she is the game's main antagonist. It's going to be challenging for Noelle to use force against her, even if she is left with no other options. The Weird Route, however, while horrific, brutal, and very morally questionable, does offer a way to avert the tragedy, even if the cost is heavy. Sticking with the Weird Route theories again, here is an alternate prediction I have to the one above. The Twisted Sword could play an integral role in the completion of the Weird Route. More specifically, perhaps it will be used to break free of the predestined path put forth by the prophecy, or if my theory about the destruction of timelines turns out to be right, maybe to just shatter reality entirely. Perhaps this is what is necessary to avoid whatever fate is foretold in the final panels of the prophecy as seen in Chapter 4. It's clear that the Twisted Sword will be a very powerful item. To craft it, the player must have the Thorn Ring and the Purified Crystal, an item that will likely be given to us by Shorm upon obtaining all 5 Shadow Crystals. The reason I think it could be a necessary item is the fact that crafting it requires the Thorn Ring, an item that is exclusive to the Weird Route and arguably one of the most important items within it. On top of this, the Weird Route is already notable for the fact that a player must go out of their way to complete a series of specific instructions in order to initiate and continue it. It wouldn't surprise me if part of this process involved returning to the previous chapters to collect all of the Shadow Crystals. However, on the flip side, there's a problem with this. While playing through the Weird Route, a jingle will usually play upon completion of an important step. This does not happen when collecting a Shadow Crystal. Maybe there could be a reason for this. Because the Weird Route is supposed to be hidden, it could be intentional for the jingle to be absent in order to prevent confusion for those playing through the normal route. In this case, what purpose the Shadow Crystals would serve in a normal playthrough I'm not too sure, but my guess is either there will be a way to obtain the Thorn Ring in Chapter 5 in the normal route. The entire chapter is likely to have a garden theme, after all. The Purified Crystal might be used to obtain something else, or it could just serve as a powerful item by itself. Okay, Now we are venturing into predictions that are a lot more speculative and aren't completely rooted in solid evidence. Referring back to a theory I discussed earlier in this video, I think at some point in the next 3 chapters, Sans, Papyrus, and Gaster might be revealed to all be related, and there is also a chance we may have to fight them. Whether or not they are all related by blood or bone, although on second thought Sans does bleed after being struck by Chara and the genocide route, so blood, actually, isn't fully clear, but either way, they could be friends or colleagues. While that first part of the theory I feel is fairly solid, the part where I mentioned the possibility of us fighting all 3 of them is far more speculative. The reason I think this could be a possibility in the first place is because in Deltarune, the Sandbone trio is fought in level 7. If there was ever a place to put a fight against Gaster, Sans, and also Papyrus, I guess it would be Chapter 7, the final chapter. Now, why would we be fighting them? No idea. Could it just be a coincidence that the Sandbone brothers are fought in the 7th level of the game and there are 7 chapters of Deltarune? Easily. Like I said, it's a very speculative theory. Next up, I think the backwards Undertale theory is still on the table. For those who don't know, there's a theory that's been going around for a while that suggests that each new Dark World we encounter bears similarity to an area of Undertale, starting from the end of the game, that being within the throne room, and working backwards towards the ruins. The Card Kingdom is fairly obvious. Undertale's final area is the throne room of Asgore. Scythe World bears resemblance to the core, with both areas themed around technology. TV World, while not having a lot to do with Hotland as a whole, does share a lot in common with its TV segments featuring Metaton. The sanctuaries are aesthetically similar to Waterfall and share a similar atmosphere. They have deep blue colour palettes, there's a lot of water, and they're both in the middle of the game in a region where things feel like they're becoming more serious. Now, as for Chapter 5, if this theory holds true, it would wind up being similar to Snowdin in some capacity. Given our speculation of it being a garden world and Gerson's descriptions of an inferno of jealousy, it seems like there might be some problems with this theory. Now, this doesn't kill it completely, however. There's always a chance that the similarities are only meant to be a loose resemblance, a bit like we see with TV World and Hotland. Given that Chapter 5 will be taking place during the festival, if the whole town were to become a dark world, like a few have speculated as an alternative to the flower shop, this would give it similarity to Snowdin, since Snowdin is, well, a town. The other possibility is that the Dark World will be in the forest. This would fit in nicely with the garden theme of the chapter, and Snowdin is surrounded by a forest, so this would match up nicely with its theoretical Undertale counterpart. Now, both of these options make the assumption that it's possible to open Dark Worlds outside of enclosed spaces. Currently, we have no idea if this is possible or not, but I wouldn't be so quick to rule it out as a possibility. Toby has broken plenty of other assumptions we've made before. As for Chapter 6, if it takes place within the Shelter, an old underground area filled with stone and concrete walls, this would give it some resemblance to the ruins. Chapter 7, on the other hand, I have no idea. Given the fact that Gerson's description of Lord of the Hammer fails to allude to it even existing, I think we're in store for something pretty wild. Is it possible that the purpose of the Weird Root is to forcibly create a shadow crystal by inflicting as much suffering as possible on Noelle? Okay, so let me explain. Referring back again to Wiztail's video on the shadow crystals, it's very likely that the crystals are formed from immense grief and suffering. We know that 5 are needed in total to create the Twisted Sword. If my theory about the Twisted Sword being an essential component to the Weird Root is correct, could there be a chance that Chapter 5 doesn't have a shadow crystal to collect at all, as there was only ever meant to be 4, one short of the number required to craft the Twisted Sword? If so, this could explain why we had to put Noelle through such immense suffering in order to complete the route. I think this would tie in nicely to the ideas that the Weird Root encompasses of forging your own path, brute force, willpower, and going against what is meant to be normal and natural. The path to get the Twisted Sword would be impossible unless you did something forbidden to make accessing it a possibility. Now, I put this one last on the list because it seems pretty out there to me. I can't think of any specific counter-arguments for this one, but it just feels like it stretches in a lot of places, and I'm not sure how I feel about it. Anyway, that concludes my theories. Hopefully, none of the ones I thought were solid seemed too kooky or stupid to you, but I think I did a decent enough job of being thorough with my logic and analysis. Deltarune, while a relatively small game, has a huge amount of detail, some of the most I've ever come across in any game, and I'm sure that's probably no secret to anyone watching. There's just so many ends to cover and possibilities to consider, it'd be impossible to cover them all. Ultimately, I don't think we'll ever be able to get good at guessing what's coming next. Our expectations have been sideswiped time and time again each time we receive new content. While Toby is known to stick to patterns, he also has a tendency to break them a lot, and often in places we least expected. Chapter 4's secret boss fight against Gerson went completely against our expectations of Shadow Crystal holders. Chapters 3 and 4 took place on the same day, Chapter 4 had 3 Dark Worlds in one, Chapter 3 started within a Dark World, the list goes on. The community being unable to make accurate predictions isn't really their fault. In a game of this scale, with the limited information we are given to work with, Toby could steer the story in a nigh infinite number of directions, and it would perfectly fit within the framework of the established lore. Despite my efforts to ensure all of the information is correct in this video, aiming to eliminate all errors is futile, and I'm almost certain that I've missed at least something in this massive video. Knowing me, it's likely something important too. So, please politely let me know if something I said was misleading or incorrect, or if I failed to mention something important. Anyway, that concludes the video. Like, subscribe, and so long.